Is slavery a matter of the past or a haunting reality of the present, you might ask? It's an uncomfortable truth that slavery is far from being consigned to the history books. In fact, it's estimated that over 27 million people worldwide are currently subject to various forms of slavery, from forced labor to the sex trade, even to being treated as inheritable property. This is a staggering number in our modern world, a world that prides itself on progression and human rights. More than ever, it's time for those who have been redeemed from the slavery of sin, especially followers of Jesus Christ, to step up and become the foremost champions of ending human slavery. Yet, a perplexing question arises. Why does the Bible not speak out strongly against slavery? Why, in fact, does the Bible seem to support the practice of human slavery? The question we raise today is, why does the Bible not speak out strongly against slavery? Let's delve into the Old Testament laws about slavery to find out. Long before the Mosaic Law, slavery was a common practice. The law neither instituted nor ended it, it regulated it. Let's delve into the different facets of slavery as per the Old Testament, starting with Hebrews owning Hebrew slaves. The Mosaic Law allowed for Hebrew men and women to willingly sell themselves into slavery to another Hebrew. However, this was not perpetual servitude. They could only serve for 6 years. In the 7th year, they were to be set free. This arrangement was akin to what we might identify today as indentured servanthood. The law was explicit in its instruction that slaves were to be treated well. When released, they were not to be sent away empty-handed. Rather, they were to be supplied liberally from the master's abundance. Then we find Hebrews owning Gentile slaves. When the Israelites conquered Canaan, they were permitted to take slaves from the remaining Gentiles. These slaves could be inherited as property and could also be made slaves for life. However, Hebrew masters were forbidden from ruling over their fellow Israelites ruthlessly. Now let's talk about the laws that regulated slavery. In Exodus 21, we see several laws that provided basic rights to slaves and limited the actions of masters. In stark contrast to the ancient world outside of Israel, where slaves had no rights, God's law extended to slaves the right to keep a wife, the right not to be sold to foreigners, the right to be adopted into a family by marriage, and the right to food and clothing. The law also restricted masters in their use of physical punishment. Lastly, we see Gentiles owning Hebrew slaves. Under certain economic circumstances, a Hebrew could sell himself as a slave to a Gentile living in Israel. The law provided for the slave's redemption at any time. The treatment of the Hebrew slave was to be considerate, with restrictions against ruthless rule. Though the Old Testament laws did not abolish slavery, they brought about a unique set of regulations that sought to protect and uphold the rights of slaves. But how does this relate to the present? The biblical laws on slavery have sparked countless debates and interpretations. What can we infer from them in the context of the modern world? In our contemporary society, the term slavery is often associated with an abhorrent and inhumane practice. However, as we examine the Old Testament, we find a nuanced approach to the concept of slavery, which was an integral part of the socioeconomic structure of the time. What's crucial to note is the emphasis on the humane treatment of slaves and the provision of certain rights, a stark contrast to the brutal reality of chattel slavery that we've come to know from historical accounts. Fast forward to the 21st century, slavery has taken new forms: forced labor, human trafficking, child labor, and debt bondage, to name a few. These practices are a clear violation of human rights and dignity. It's here that the teachings of the Bible come into play. While the Old Testament regulated slavery, it by no means celebrated it. It recognized the dignity of every individual and commanded fair and just treatment of all, including slaves. The Bible's teachings of love, compassion, and justice can be a potent force in combating these modern forms of slavery. Take, for example, the principle of the Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee, where slaves were to be set free. These principles reflect a profound respect for human dignity and freedom. In today's context, this could translate into advocating for fair labor practices, fighting against human trafficking, and working towards the eradication of child labor. Further, the Bible's teachings on love and justice encourage us to view every individual as an equal, irrespective of their socioeconomic status. This viewpoint can inspire religious followers to take a stand against the exploitation of vulnerable populations. While the Bible may not explicitly condemn slavery, its teachings of love, justice, and equality can be powerful tools in the fight against modern slavery. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying these teachings in a way that promotes human dignity and freedom for all.